Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Damage Report Lockdown Edition. We're in day X of this thing. I don't know how many it's been. Probably for you, these days are starting to blend together. But we do have something special today, and that is Michael Shure, who joins us now. Michael, welcome back to the show.
It's great to be on the Damage Report at home.
Yeah, exactly. It's been a bit since we've had you on, and I'll give previews of the stories for everyone in just a minute, but I know that over the last few months you've been traveling all over because of the presidential primary. I'm assuming this has been, like, for a lot of people, a very big change for you.
Yeah, it has been. I mean, you when you're on the road, you're complaining that you're sleeping in lots of different beds, and you'd love to be back home in your own bed. Then when you get home and you're actually stuck to it, and you can't really leave your home, it really makes you want to go back on the road. And anyone who says they'd rather be home is lying. I mean, this is, if you follow politics like we do and you love this stuff, then being out there covering it is really the best thing. And it's terrible. It's terrible for so many reasons. That's probably least among them. But I do miss being out there covering this race, especially as it was getting to reaching a head there, and that's made it kind of difficult too.
Yeah, exactly. It's very different, and it's also as we've transitioned away from a lot of the routines and traditions that make up our life. Also, the news is fundamentally about one thing for the most part. We've got a few different things we're going to be talking about today, including the big Senate vote last night, Bernie Sanders, his sort of last stand to protect the sort of supersized unemployment insurance. So we're going to have some awesome video of that. We've got the most recent economic news, which is not looking good. Not surprising, but not good.
Right.
And Trump's press conferences. We're going to have a little conversation about what should happen with those, and a little bit more besides. So everyone who is already in the chat, thank you for joining us. As always, if you haven't already, please hit the like button to send this stream out to more people so that they can take part. One more heads up. YouTube, I don't know if they've already done this, but they are going to be switching over to defaulting to 480p for streams. So if you want to watch in HD, either today or very soon, you're going to have to start activating that manually in the little gear on the YouTube video. So if the quality is suddenly lower, that's probably what you're going to need to do. So just a heads up, either for today or very soon.
Is that to me, John, or is that to everybody?
No, that's to everyone, actually. So YouTube, I guess to manage the flow of internet, they're going to be defaulting to lower. It's still all available, but you have to sort of opt into it. Okay, and with that, why don't we jump into the news? Last night, big vote on the Senate financial stimulus bill, and Bernie Sanders was making sort of a last stand to stop some who were trying to strip out the additional money that would be going in unemployment checks to those who have lost their jobs as a result of this crisis. He vowed to hold up the stimulus legislation with a demand for stronger conditions on the bill's corporate welfare fund if the Republican senators refuse to drop their objections to the unemployment provisions. And we want to show you just a little bit of some of what he was saying in his address to the senators. Some good stuff here. So here's the first bit.
The other thing that this bill does, which is right, is it says, okay, we are in the midst of a horrific crisis, unprecedented in modern American history. So not only are you going to get your regular unemployment benefits, we're going to add another $600 a week to it. And now I find that some of my Republican colleagues are very distressed. They're very upset that somebody who's making 10, 12 bucks an hour might end up with a paycheck for 4 months more than they received last week. Oh my God, the universe is collapsing. Imagine that. Somebody who's making 12 bucks an hour now, like the rest of us, faces an unprecedented economic crisis with the 600 bucks on top of their regular unemployment check, might be making a few bucks more for 4 months. Oh my word, will the universe survive? How absurd and wrong is that? What kind of value system is that? Meanwhile, these very same folks had no problem a couple of years ago voting for $1 trillion in tax breaks for billionaires and large profitable corporations. Not a problem.
So you saw their comparison to how willing they were willing just a couple of years ago they were to give trillions of dollars away. Not to mention that we're in the middle of potentially the biggest single financial bill slash stimulus slash whatever. But they have one problem, and that's with the idea that people might temporarily make a little bit more money as they are hunkered down, worried about their lives and the lives of their family. Michael, what did you think about some of the back and forth that you've been following in this Senate process?
Yeah, I thought it was a terrible look from Ben Sass and Tim Scott and Rick Scott and Lindsey Graham to be out there taking this bill apart on that issue. If you're going to take it apart on some issues, that it went too far, that it goes too long, that the amounts were too high in general, but on the implied notion that people in Tim Scott's state of South Carolina are going to try and go on unemployment and not go back to work because they would make a little bit more. That's just an insult to America. And the way that was processed by these four senators as an outrage, at least was set aside because they didn't have very much support over it. It was also something that had been hammered out with the White House and the Senate leadership, so it wasn't going to go anywhere anyway. And it did give Sanders a great opportunity to talk about the things that he talks about best. And I think that he's an important senator in that regard, just to keep people real, as it were, about that.
Let's go to just a bit more of what Bernie had to say, and here he's talking specifically about how originally, before the extra 600 was added in, there were going to be stimulus checks, but that they were going to be sort of scaled down for people who already had less money.
But when it comes to low-income workers in the midst of a terrible crisis, maybe some of them were having more money than they previously made. Oh my word, we got to strip that out. Got to tell those poor people that no matter what. By the way, when the McConnell bill first came up, unbelievably, and I know many Republicans objected to this, they were saying that, well, we want to give whatever it was, $1,000 or $1,200, but poor people should get less. You see, because poor people are down here, they don't eat, they don't pay rent, they don't go to the doctor, they're somehow inferior because they're poor, we're going to give them less. Well, that was addressed. Now everybody is going to get the $1,200, but some of my Republican friends still have not given up on the need to punish the poor and working people. You haven't raised the minimum wage in 10 years. Minimum wage should be at least $15 an hour. You haven't done that. You've cut program after program after program, and now, horror of horrors, for 4 months, workers might be earning a few bucks more than they otherwise went. Well, needless to say, this is an amendment that is coming up. I don't think it's going to go very far. And if it does go far, I will introduce an amendment to deal with the corporate welfare, the $500 billion in corporate welfare, which is, to me, a very serious problem. But I do not think they're going to get the 60 votes, and that will be the end of it.
So, look, Michael, I think ideally he could have stopped them from blocking the unemployment, and also that something substantive could be done to provide additional safeguards over that gigantic slush fund, which they're saying is $500 billion, but there's a lot of reason to believe that in the end it's going to represent far more money. I guess it is certainly a win for him, both in terms of substance, but also in terms of optics. And to have the Republican Party, the stand that some of them wanted to make was poor people are making out too good in this pandemic. That seems like a weird choice.
It's a bad political choice to have made. And, one of the other things to remember, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand yesterday called this first bill triage, right? This is where you take the patient right away when they get to the hospital. This is the triage bill, and there are going to be bills that follow. But one of the important parts of this is, and I think perspective is important too, is that this was a $2 trillion bill, an annual appropriations budget is between 1.2 and 4 trillion a year, and they take months to put those bills together. This bill was cobbled together in days, which is pretty extraordinary when you listen to the fact that you have Bernie Sanders and Tim Scott on virtual, polar opposites of the spectrum there, that everyone was able to come together and get something. So I think that a lot of I spoke to a couple of Democratic staffers yesterday, no senators, but Democratic staffers who said, look, they didn't care what they had to give away as long as they were able to cover the people they were able to cover, and they did so to some margin. And of course, they didn't care at all, but they were willing to give up a lot in corporate to get as much as they could for working Americans.
Yeah, and I feel like, my God, when we finally check in 6 months or in a year, 5 years, we look at the long term, what was done with this fund, I think it is going to be a gigantic debacle. Like the idea that Steve Mnuchin, a guy that we're going to turn to shortly, that he's the one who, at least for the near future, is going to have supreme authority in terms of doling that out, and that some, Senate panel he might have to go and speak to briefly if he waives any of the protections that are baked into the bill. I know that all of that was designed to make us a little bit less worried about what's going to be done with this huge sum of money, this unprecedented sum of money. But I feel like it's at best minimal safeguards, and I don't trust any of the people that are going to be responsible for this money.
Well, they do say there's going to be an inspector general, and those inspector generals, as a country, we have come to, for better or worse, trust them in these sorts of sort of oversight ways. That's the system we have in place, whether we like it or not. And it's probably better than Mnuchin, probably better than some of the people in the administration. We look back, the same arguments were being made in the bailout, not of the banks, but of the auto companies as well. And that people said, oh, this was, why not just let them, you remember Mitt Romney may have lost an election by saying "Let Detroit die," right? And so we as a country chose not to do that. We look back with great criticism of the way some of it was handled, but on balance, we saved the automobile industry, and that was important. So if this has any of that, but I do agree, there's a great deal of skepticism. Also skepticism because of who the president is and who the administration is, and the leadership is the leadership. But I do think that there are at least checks on the leadership. There don't seem to be within the administration.
Yeah. By the way, I've seen some of these super chats that are coming in, and the first one I saw from Das Bois Fleisch is epic politics, man.
That's better than shill or whatever they can throw at me.
Yeah, well, that'll come.
Believe me. Yeah, bring it on. I appreciate the epic politics, man. But I don't read the good or the bad. So.
G. George says, keep the good work you do. Thank you, G. George. I saw some people talking about the HD thing I was talking about, and some people said HD for all who want it, which I'm sure Buttigieg will appreciate. And someone else, it's like, I can imagine like a World War II era propaganda poster being made in it, and someone said, I watch simply so others can simply watch. Like they keep it at 480 to make sure the internet works for everyone.
That's pretty good. I get it. But I do like that HD for all who want it.
Exactly. Niguel says, here's some money. Thank you. We could use it too. Because as I've told people, maybe this is their first stream, perhaps understandably so, lots of brands don't want to put ads on videos about the coronavirus or the pandemic. And here's the thing, that's 95% of all the news. And when you run a news show, it means that hypothetically, your ability to, sustain yourself monetarily while you're doing this might drop off to zero. So that's just something to bear in mind.
Yeah, it's true though. Yeah.
Okay, with that, why don't we jump into another story? G. George says, what I meant to say is keep up the good work you do. G. George, I totally understood, but thank you for the second super chat. We do appreciate that.
I like G. George. I wish now that this is the era of coronavirus and we should all be reading what everybody's writing. I can't really read the chat that well. It's little on my screen.
It is very little. Yeah, I apologies for that. But we're all adapting.
I'm glad everybody's participating. I'm glad G. George corrected what didn't need to be corrected, and appreciate it.
And everyone in the chat, by the way, I know that traditionally before the pandemic, you had to worry about liking a stream because, I don't know if you know this, Michael, but for some weird reason on the YouTube Live app, on my phone, the Pixel 2 XL, when a stream hits 1,000 likes, it crashes every single time. But we're not on that. Exactly. It's so weird. But we're not on that. So everybody, the thousands of you who are watching this, feel free to hit the like button. And with that, let's jump into more news. This morning, the stock market opened up, which was a little bit weird, considering that the economic news that I was reading about seemed a little bit negative. Nearly 3.3 million people filed for unemployment benefits last week. Just 3 weeks ago, barely 200,000 people applied for jobless benefits, a historically low number. In the half-century that the government has tracked applications, the most applications filed in a single week had been fewer than 700,000. So we are breaking records. And yet, Michael, millions are newly jobless. The stock market opened up. I sort of get it. The bill was passed, but that really does seem weird. And for those who have always believed that talk of the economy that's focused around the stock market, that the experience of working Americans, the experience of those in Wall Street is fundamentally unlinked. This is going to seem like some evidence for that.
Well, no, yeah, no question. I mean, listen, I'm not someone you bring on to talk about the economy. I don't know macroeconomics or microeconomics really well, but I do know that the market likes certainty, and at least having the bill makes it more certain. That said, all of these people out of work, to me, translates as uncertainty. The other side of it is, those people who are out of work are being hopefully bolstered by the bill that was passed or will be passed by the House presumably today. And that's another story too, John, is what's going to happen in the House. If one person, one member, one Louis Gohmert shows up and says he doesn't like it, then it's all done. But we'll get to that maybe on the phone later today. The whole thing about this, the jobless numbers, is it should be frightening. But of course, I guess Wall Street sees that as, well, payrolls will be down, and that means earnings could be up if payroll's down. And I don't know that that's exactly right, but that's what it translates to me.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's just one of those things where it's like, hey, something is happening, that's good, and so it's temporarily up, but it might not mean anything. I guess that's possible. Yeah. Just to put it in perspective for people who like visuals, this is the claims. That little blue bar on the far right, that stands out. Hopefully it will begin to drop, but we'll see.
Crazy, right?
It's insane. It's like if you accurately render this to scale, it's nonsensical, effectively. But I don't know. I'm no more of an expert on the economy than you are. I look at this news and it seems bad, but hey, maybe I'm wrong, because Steve Mnuchin, he seems to think it's not particularly relevant, and that's literally what he said. Let's watch.
I'm curious as to what your thoughts were when you saw that 3.283 million number this morning.
To be honest with you, I just think these numbers right now are not relevant. And, whether they're bigger or smaller in the short term, I mean, obviously there are people who have jobless claims. And again, the good thing about this bill is the president is protecting those people. So, now with these plans, small businesses hopefully will be able to hire back a lot of those people.
Okay, so the 3.3 million, not particularly relevant. Seems like a weird way to put it.
And also the way he's saying the president is protecting these people, as if it's not the Congress and the elected officials, that the people elected as well that are doing it. That always irks me when he says things like that.
Yeah, and I guess Trump is theoretically not going to veto it, so that's compassionate of him, I guess. But I would not, of all the people that I would say have been sort of outspoken champions for making sure that we provide as much aid as possible to individuals, workers, and those who have recently lost their jobs, I don't think he cracks the top 20. And he has certainly, he's been talking about concern for the economy and wanting it to get restarted no matter what. We're going to turn to that a little bit later on. But in terms of even sort of shallow, substance-free, right-wing populist appeals, I'm not hearing that much out of him. But I guess Mnuchin's got to pitch it that way. Mnuchin, I've said many times, I don't trust him being involved in this pretty much at all, but he is definitely a horrible person to put out there in terms of crafting a message. He looks like as if Wall Street constructed something in a basement, and just something that's powered by liquefied greed. It's a weird person to have out in front to reassure me. Maybe it's more reassuring to CEOs.
But it's interesting that the Secretary of the Treasury is a weird person to put out front to reassure people about the economy in general, right? And you're right. And that speaks to the problem this administration has had from the beginning. Rex Tillerson was a terrible person to put out there to talk about international affairs. He was a ExxonMobil CEO. So that has infected this administration from the beginning. Listen, you're going to get an investment banker, a treasury, generally speaking. You're going to get people who've been in the banking industry for a long time. But the sort of flip way that he talks about this stuff, and he feels almost disconnected to it. And I shouldn't say that. He's really been in the trenches on this in terms of disconnection. He's been in the trenches on the Hill talking with both sides, and both sides have actually given him a little bit of credit for helping here. Maybe it was better that he was there instead of one of the, Mick Mulvaney or Mark Meadows heading this thing up. So to that end, maybe it's a blessing. But yeah, the disconnect, and also the celebration of good jobs numbers compared to how they treat the bad jobs numbers is really another disconnect.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw it maybe as a sort of micro example of that disconnect. The GOP Twitter account, I don't know if you saw this a few days ago, they tweeted out the Dow just had its biggest rise in 3 years or something. And it was when you zoom, so they showed a little bit of it. When you zoom out, it had cratered for weeks. Then it went back up, but it could only move that far because it had cratered. And it was still way below where it was a few weeks ago. It's like there really are alternative realities playing out.
In sports, if you win the Comeback Player of the Year award, it means you had a terrible season the season before.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm curious though, maybe it's a little bit harder for you to, interact with some of the people in DC that you might usually get information from. But so I'm effectively a complete outsider to that process, not a big person in terms of having contacts. It looks like this bill theoretically could pass. Nancy Pelosi says that she expects wide bipartisan support. As you point out, maybe a Louis Gohmert could step in. What do you think about that possibility? Are you fairly confident that they've settled around this formulation?
I am, and I think Nancy has a pretty good hold on her caucus, so it's not a and she has a good beat on how the House is voting. And I don't know what her interactions with McCarthy have been like over the past several days. But one of the interesting things about the process is that I have spoken to some members of the House over the past few days who have said to me that they just don't want to go back to Washington. Older members of the House who are actually wary of going onto the House floor with all these other people. One of them said to me last week, a week or so ago, John Lewis was on the floor. He's fighting pancreatic cancer. What if somebody came in contact with him? Of course, he was just waving and staying his distance, but nonetheless, there are 435 people in what becomes a small room once they're all in it. The other side of it is that this, they're doing it under unanimous consent, and which is great. It's an easier way to pass a bill, but you say without objection, so ordered. If there's an objection, then they all have to come in and vote. So if Louis Gohmert or Chip Roy from Texas or Andy Biggs from Arizona come in and they want something different in this bill, then you're going down a different path. I'm hopeful, and I think most people are, that McCarthy will get his troops to say okay to this.
Yeah, and look, I can understand their concern about packing in there, after the whole Rand Paul thing, of him supposedly being very flippant about the possibility that he had it, and it does appear to be spreading. I guess we'll see, because look, even if this passes, this is the initial volley that's supposed to help in some ways. I have massive concerns, but in some ways it's supposed to help. But it's not we're not good on Easter. And I know we're going to talk about that a little bit later, but things are only accelerating at this point. And so hopefully they're ready for something, either remote voting or whatever. But we have to have a functioning democracy, even if we don't necessarily have a functioning ability to transport ourselves around and congregate.
Yeah, and with remote voting in the House, that's sort of what the unanimous consent bill is. It's sort of remote voting. It's voting by proxy. We don't need to vote on this. It passes without objection. And I can't see the politics of objecting to this working for any of these people except in their districts. But the National Republican Party does not want anyone to stand in the way of this passage, because then it immediately will go on to the Republicans if it doesn't make it through the House, and everyone has to come back, and this gets delayed even further. And to your point about remote voting in the Senate, yeah, it's a constitutional thing, and it does set a bad precedent later, and there'll be times when we've wanted votes that we are in favor of and they can't get them because XYZ senator can't come in from wherever. But there is a bill that's being put up right now by Brian Schatz of Hawaii, the Democrat, who is going to try and get some sort of method, of course, from Hawaii, so he doesn't have to fly in as much, but some sort of remote voting put in. Yeah.
I mean, you can, especially for the people who are literally on quarantine themselves, you can have medical proxies for certain sorts of medical decisions. Just got to integrate a little legislative power there too.
Right.
Okay. So let's sort of lighten.
But how do you vote on it?
That's a good point.
Yeah.
It's a chicken and egg thing. Chicken and the vote. Okay, let's go to something a little bit lighter for one moment. We awoke to interesting economic news. Millions have recently lost their jobs, and it's possible that the claims will be far higher. That's what we know now. Fox and Friends also greeted this new news, and Ainsley Earhardt talked about the way that all this is affecting businesses and individuals around her.
What's interesting too, we're talking about this, and every day we're talking about different topics because we're moving in hopefully the direction of getting to where China is now or South Korea is now, and just getting some improvement. But I was thinking, I live in the city. You can't go back to the city. You can, but I don't want to because I don't want to be around the area that's infected the most. But I'm thinking like all the bills that are stacking up at my apartment. We've got to think about that kind of thing. If you bought clothing before all of this happened, if you want to return it, our store is gonna waive that 30-day period where you can get your money back if you need to return something. These are all the things. People are staying home. Women, y'all don't think about this, guys, but this is not a priority. But women have to get their hair done. I saw someone tweet out, you're going to see what color our real hair is because our roots are going to grow in. Women, all my friends are saying, this is not a priority. People are dying, and I realize that. But they can't get their nails done. Businesses are closed everywhere. We're in priority mode right now. It's pharmacies and it is grocery stores. Those are really the only places people are going now, Steve.
So, look, I'm going to acknowledge that she did keep saying that the things she was going on about are not priorities. That's true. But she was using, a nice chunk of one of the most watched news shows in the entire country to talk about that this is the issue. As a chyron says, over 3 million people have lost their jobs. Right. I don't know. It seems weird.
It's also a priority for her. She wouldn't be talking about it. Right. Mm-hmm. She wouldn't be thinking about it. She's giving herself that little disclaimer of, no, I'm not really thinking about it. I know this isn't important, but, it's absurd. It's some of the most embarrassing seconds of television I've seen in a long time. It was so disconnected. And I can't imagine anyone who doesn't think that. And I don't know anyone who wouldn't think that. But maybe it's because I don't know very many people who watch Fox except those who have to.
Yeah. And look, for regular individuals who are on lockdown, the fact that a lot of what they have come to expect out of their lives that they can't do, I have a lot of empathy for that. But she's supposed to be one of the people who delivers like news to millions of people every morning. And one of the parts of that video that a lot of people aren't focusing on is she says, as we get to the point like China where we're sort of moving past this, like she is participating perhaps in a lighter, less propagandistic way in the idea that we're good by Easter. We're good in a couple of weeks. We're almost through this.
Right.
We're not already almost through this. I look at these coronavirus numbers all the time. We have shot up by more than 7,500 cases so far today. We blew past 1,000 deaths. We're now above 1,100. We're like duking it out with Italy for the most cases. And both of us are going to pass China very soon. It's not tapering off. It is, in fact, still accelerating, and everyone acknowledges that these numbers do not really represent anything. They represent the people who have been tested, but we know that across huge sections of the country, many people are not being tested. Those with milder cases probably never will be tested, and yet the numbers dead continues to rise.
No, that's right, but it's just I'm sorry, going back to her, and these numbers do continue to rise, and the Easter thing is as absurd as we know it is. But I mean, this is not about the people who can't get their hair done, right? This is about the people that can't cut their hair, that can't dye their hair. Those are the people that are in trouble here. It's not the people who can't get their hair cut. They'll get their hair cut one day. But how do you catch up if you're not getting those tips, if you're not getting those wages for cutting the hair, for doing the nails because you have to be shuttered? It's so misses the point of what the problem is with this economy now. It's not because the luxury things that Ainsley Earhardt wants are unavailable to her. Do what you do at home, right? I mean, most Americans don't pay $300 to get their hair dyed. They go in the shower and they probably put some hair dye in, right? Yeah. I mean, I don't know, but it's and I really don't. But this is my hair. But it so talks about the two Americas, right? And that's exactly what Fox exudes in that clip.
Yeah. So right there, we're sort of dabbling in the misinformation. Let's go to the prime source for it.
This is real information.
It is? Okay. Do you want me to zoom?
I'm not dyeing my hair.
It looks real.
Great. Look at this. Look at that.
That's true.
Like yeah. I do cover that sometimes on TV, though.
Do you?
And by sometimes I mean daily.
Okay. Okay, let's jump to our next topic. Donald Trump's new thing, I guess, over the last 24 hours is that his call to sort of reopen, reinvigorate the economy by Easter, by April 12th. The strike back against that from everyone, all the experts, isn't that they know better. It's that they want to keep things locked down to hurt him. And this has become very explicit in his social media activity with tweets like, "The lamestream media is the dominant force in trying to get me to keep our country closed as long as possible in the hope that it will be detrimental to my election success. The real people want to get back to work ASAP. We will be stronger than ever before. I hear that fake news CNN just reported that I am isolated in the White House, wondering out loud, when will life return to normal? Does anybody really believe that? There was no leak. They made it up. They are corrupt and fake news. I've been packed all day with meetings. I have no time for stupidity." He makes the time, I think. You find the time. But anyway, so he's saying
every
that,
afternoon at around 5. I know we'll get to that later, but he does make time for that later.
Yeah, so like I've been raising concerns ever since I heard him bring up this beautiful timeline of Easter. There's nothing medical that's going into his decision for that date. The doctors have been very clear. If he does this, to the extent that he can influence it, because a lot of this is on the governors and mayors and things like that, it will be absolutely disastrous. And pointing that out is not just trying to hurt his approval rating or his re-election chances. People are desperately trying to save as many lives as possible.
Yeah, and it's not only that, it's that you hear this not just from the doctors who are beside him, you hear it from medical professionals everywhere. You also hear it from virologists who trace these things, who say, the president's talking about, oh, maybe in rural parts of Texas or Iowa or places like that, we can get back to normal before the cities do. That's what he's going to look for, one church that congregates on Easter Sunday and say he was right. But these virologists are saying just because it's not in Iowa or rural Texas now, it's going to get there if we're not careful. And so the places that the president thinks that he could possibly have that happen are not even out of danger at all. And so it just totally misses it. The governors know, Republican and Democratic governors know he's missing it. The doctors know. It's optimistic. It's a bad play by the president to go specific, but George Bush stood before mission accomplished, and that's a little bit what this reminded me of the other day.
Yeah. And so when I look, I should not be the person who's choosing the date, obviously, that we roll back some of the stay at home. No. But I would argue that based on this screenshot that I took this morning, I don't think we're quite there.
It's certainly not on that trajectory for April 12th. No,
if we can flip it somehow, maybe, but no, not the way it's looking right there. And look, hopefully, like I know.
What do you think of that? What do you think of that idea?
Of what?
Just as a term, I just thought of flatten that curve, not flip, just flatten the curve.
That could be a hashtag. I think
you should go with it. You do the damage report daily. You can use it whenever you want.
I'll try. Hashtag TDR live. And look, thankfully, like here in California, Gavin Newsom seems like he's ready for us to go for quite a while with the social distancing. Eric Garcetti, I think last night, said that we're looking at least 2 months. And that, based on what I've heard from medical professionals, that seems quite reasonable. Many would say that is not extreme enough, that we are still being too lenient in allowing people the amount of freedom that they're having to congregate and those sorts of things. But certainly as a bare minimum, it seems like a good call considering the numbers that we're looking at. And I wanted to add one more thing. So I don't necessarily agree in general with a lot of these individuals, but a group of 32 prominent economists from both parties published a letter yesterday arguing that saving lives during the pandemic doesn't need to conflict with saving the economy. Let me give you a bit of that. Our paramount concern at this moment should be to slow the spread of this virus and equip our healthcare system to effectively respond. Saving lives and saving the economy are not in conflict right now. We will hasten the return to robust economic activity by taking steps to stem the spread of the virus and save lives. These collective efforts will allow more businesses to get up and running again as soon as possible and minimize the severity of the economic hardship on the American people. And look, I'm not an expert on medicine, I'm not an expert on business, but I have a feeling that if you tell everyone to go back and bodies start piling up, I feel like that has to have some sort of negative economic impact. I'm not an expert. I admit that.
And that's what some of the people, again, some of the people who are not economically savvy the other day when this came down, when Dan Patrick, the lieutenant governor of Texas, was talking about it, was like, no, that doesn't help the economy. This is not good for our economy. Even if you take what he said at face value, which of course I didn't do, but some did, and many did, shockingly. I think that it's an absurd notion, even on the basic economics of it.
Yeah. I'm curious. I know that they would say that I have Trump derangement syndrome. I'm driven by complete animus towards the president. I get that. You're potentially more objective. What do you think is going through his mind when he continues to push for April 12th, like a little bit more than two and a half weeks away, potentially advising states, many of which won't listen if they're blue states, if they have good governors, but some red states, they're not going to want to, seem to be going against what Donald Trump wants. So what is actually going through his mind when he's pushing for this timeline?
I mean, I think the morning of April 13th, where he can point to one church that celebrated Easter that had been closed the week before. That's the only thing I'm thinking of, that he can do that and he can say that he won, that he was right. He's always right. It's all about his narcissism. I mean, I don't. I'm not terribly impartial when it comes to him. I can be objective when it comes to just about anybody else, but not Donald Trump. But this is his narcissism in full play. It's a playbook, and it's a playbook that he's actually pretty good at, right? Setting himself up and then finding a way to say he delivered even when he didn't. And that's what I think is in mind for April 12th, that people are going to be tired of this by then, which they are by now. And he's right. They'll be more tired of it with every day that goes on. But on April 13th, he can say, hey, look, here in Racine, Wisconsin, you had some people that went into a church that they weren't there the week before, and they're celebrating Easter. They resurrected, right? That's probably all he knows having to. But you asked me what I think that's on his mind. I do think that's on his mind, is how can we turn this into something good for me? And that's his way of doing it here. And it was probably off the cuff also,
Yeah, that's possible. And once he's said it, then theoretically he might feel like he has to keep saying it. I would say that if we find out on April 13th that one church did congregate, I would check in with those individuals on like April 18th, because I think there's a good chance some of them might have coronavirus at that point.
No question. Yeah.
Mark G, thank you for your super chat, saying you need to watch this. The System, Who Rigged It, How We Fix It with Robert Reich. Thank you. Yes. Appreciate his work. There's always comments asking if my background is real or if it's a green screen. It is real. It is not a green screen. Although I do have a green screen. I don't use it. Okay. Darwin Awards to follow. That's unfortunately potentially true.
Yeah.
And for everyone, I apologize that there are some bots. We are still trying to fight back against that, but it is difficult when you have this many people in the chat. There are going to be some bots, and unfortunately, it's difficult to have enough moderation to knock it all down.
I can't see anything. What does one bot say? Just give me one bot, like MAGA, 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 or something.
Yeah. Sometimes it'll be like anti-Semitic comments, or sometimes it'll be like something about like sex webcam shows or something like that. It's either hate or lust. It's one of those two things, with a little bit of greed on the side, by the way. And anyway, so thank you everyone who continues to watch. Yes, One Fat Cat, I do like me some board games. Kara
I
says,
do too, but probably not the board games, John. I love board games, but I feel like we are different.
What name one?
Board.
What do you got?
Stratego.
Hey, I played Stratego growing up. It's been a while, but I did play it.
Okay. All the board games I played growing up, people don't play anymore. They're much more. I like trivia games, but I do think that there are some good ones. Are you guys still doing trivia? I should go with you guys.
That trivia has been shut down, unfortunately, for like a year and a half, 2 years. You know what? Next time you're on, we should do a little trivia segment. I'll test you. Okay. Kara, thank you for your super chat as well. And with that, why don't we jump back into it? 1 sec. I want to make sure I have everything queued up. There we go. Okay. For the past couple of weeks, Donald Trump has been giving at least daily press conferences, and they have become more and more stand-ins for his rallies with every passing day, with Donald Trump frequently spreading misinformation, even information that has already been corrected, telling people about changes that have been made that are more than a year out. Raising hopes falsely, unfortunately, and having to be corrected in real time by people like Dr. Fauci. And I think the question has sort of grown in a lot of people's minds. What is the media supposed to do about this? So we've brought the media on the show, Michael Shure. Should networks be broadcasting these press conferences? Is it the responsible thing to do?
I don't know anymore. I think the networks that have somebody in the room are going to want to do it because they're going to want to showcase their reporters there if they get an ask. But they can do that by clipping it as they do on an average day when it's the White House spokesperson or, somebody else from the administration and they ask the question. If you're watching NBC, you're going to see Peter Alexander's question and answer in that broadcast later in the evening. I don't think there's enough there, and I think that it actually could be dangerous to show what the president is saying. It's an amazing thing to be able to say that, but dangerous to be able to show that when it's not fact-based, and this is so serious. So I do think, and I tweeted about this the other day, I don't think this should be shown in its entirety. I think that you can get the highlights, and I think that you can ask for Dr. Birx and Dr. Fauci to do separate press conferences, and the task force, maybe the vice president would allow that. That hearing from the president is not reassuring and it's not accurate, but hearing from the doctors is always helpful.
Yeah, I mean, he has repeatedly lied. He has repeatedly, even about programs that are going to happen. The timeline is never what he implies it is.
Yeah.
His references to miracle drugs that are going to cure this thing potentially have already generated a body count. Right. Theoretically, I'm not saying anything. I'm just saying. And so I certainly think playing the portion of the speech where he is at the podium live seems incredibly irresponsible. He can be relied on to lie, and it is impossible for people at home, many of whom they're terrified, they're stressed out. How are they supposed to know to fact check all of this when they're just desperately trying to find out what's going to happen and they are being lied to? Now, maybe someone like Dr. Fauci, you can play his section. He seems to have been relatively straightforward and honest throughout this. But the rest, if Donald Trump makes some sort of announcement that's important, that people need to know, you can clip it out, like you said. You could play it afterward and add context to it. It should, like, the fact that some of this would be unfiltered seems incredibly irresponsible.
Yeah, and look, I mean, the practical elements of this are such that the president doesn't give us edicts. He doesn't tell us what we should be doing. It's important, I think, to air what the mayors and the governors are saying. They're actually doing things. The president is overseeing a group of people that are overseeing a lot more. And I don't mean that to this president or the office. I don't mean to the office of the presidency, but this president doesn't do that well. And if the role of the president is to be the comforter in chief to a degree, at times that is part of the role of the president, even if you like or don't like that president. This guy doesn't do that. He doesn't know how to connect on that. And so you're not even showing the part of even Peter Alexander, going back to him, he asked a question, which I said was a layup of a question, right? Mm-hmm. What can you tell the people to make them feel better? And the president thought it was a nasty question. It's a beautiful question for any president, right? I can't think of my least favorite presidents and my most favorite presidents, any of them not just, embracing that opportunity to say, hey, listen, this is bad. We're in this together. We're going to, whatever it was. And I promise you that we're on it and we're going to take care of you. Something like that. This president doesn't know how to deal in that kind of platitude. I don't think it serves any purpose. I don't need to watch it. I don't think anyone in America benefits from watching it. And one more thing on this, John. The other day, the president left the podium early and he did it yesterday as well, but he left Mike Pence there to carry out about 7 or 8 more minutes of the press conference. And forget what you think of Mike Pence, because even though I can't forget what I think of Mike Pence, you watched somebody who was so vastly different. It was comforting just to watch somebody take the questions, answer them, defer as presidents and vice presidents do, give the question to somebody else. It felt like there was some semblance of control and normalcy there. And I think, in a big picture way, that's kind of what America has been saying in this election. Whatever normalcy was, we want it back in some way. And I saw that in a moment in Mike Pence. And that right there made me say that I don't think we should be showing these press conferences at all anymore.
I want to read a comment I saw from Ted Koppel about this. He says, training a camera on a live event and just letting it play out is technology, not journalism. Journalism requires editing and context. I recognize that presidential utterances occupy a unique category. Within that category, however, President Trump has created a special compartment all his own. The question clearly is whether his status as President of the United States obliges us to broadcast his every briefing live. No. No more so than you at the time should be obliged to provide your readers with a daily verbatim account. And I understand that for some of them, it's like a big ratings thing. A lot of people are watching. A lot of people go to his rallies. That doesn't make it right. It doesn't make it journalism. If you want to play the things that he says that are untrue and immediately correct them, I think that that's responsible. I think you should definitely do that. But yeah, the idea that you would just play it, it's the rallies in 2016 all over again. It's exactly what he wants. It's in the run-up to an election. It seems supremely irresponsible, particularly when the information he's providing could get people killed.
No, that's true. And what you said is true, and what Koppel said is true, and others have said it. Karen Tumulty said it. This is just stand in for what he's not able to do on the trail. It's a huge advantage for him. He's got a captive audience for sure. And people are, that it's the advantage of being the president, obviously, and running for reelection. But everybody can watch because nobody has anything else to do right now, right? So you're looking at your television or your internet or your phone or whatever it is. And you're also looking for a glimmer of hope. And when he offers Easter, some people say, oh, my God, thank you. That makes me feel a little bit better than I did before I watched this, even though there's so much untruth in there. And you're right. I mean, a lot of these networks, and I'm saying MSNBC specifically because I've been watching their coverage of it the most, but they'll come out of that press conference and they will go right into what the president said that was accurate and wasn't accurate. CNN, I believe, has been doing the same, but I haven't been watching them as much. However, if you could somehow find a time, and the technology is there to sort of ring a bell every time he says something isn't truth, to immediately fact check it, that would also be a spectacle worth watching too.
Like pop-up video.
Right, exactly. Well, yeah, to an extent, yeah, but you have to be able to like really, have your researchers doing it really quickly.
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, NPR member station in Seattle, KUOW, they have announced they're not going to be covering it live. They're going to revisit the decision on a daily basis, but they documented a few just obvious lies that he's told that have been very consequential, and so they've made that decision. I would like to see that spread.
Yeah, likewise.
And let's see. Tammy Kakuta says, I'm so late to the party, but can I tell Michael I love hearing from him? Also, you, John, love you too. Thank you, Tammy.
Thanks, Tammy.
Very nice.
Yeah, I love being on with. I love hearing from John too, by the way.
I'm okay with it. I can take a little bit. Saren, thank you for your message. Let's see. Kevin says, thank you, John, for bringing us news with no spin. We really appreciate your work. Well, I'm sure there's some spin, but I appreciate you watching either way. Thank you. And there was one more from Rich who says, please research Paul Taylor's 1989 See How They Run eye-opener. I will leave a reference to that, and I will do that after the show today. Thank you, Rich, for that. By the way, I saw one comment saying I always watch The Damage Report and The Dice Tower, but now with the background, they're getting mixed up. I, too, watched The Dice Tower. I'm sure, Michael, you're not familiar with that YouTube channel. They do board game stuff.
Oh, do they?
They do.
So
they do.
What are some of the board games, John?
What are some of the board games?
Yeah, give me 4 board games that you love.
Okay, I really like King of Tokyo. That's very fun. It's like Yahtzee, but with monsters duking it out. Eldritch Horror is a sort of cooperative story-based game where people are going around the world to stop these gigantic elder gods from breaking into our universe and killing everyone. Pandemic is a game where you play workers for the CDC going around the world to stop the spread of disease. Don't try to buy it. It's sold out for obvious reasons. And recently, Funkoverse. It's like a fighting game using Funko Pops. That's very fun, too.
Okay.
So if you're watching this and you watch the Dice Tower, tell them I want to do something with them. I would love to do a top 10 list. Let's get a hashtag going for Tom Vassell. Anyway, with that, why don't we jump into... Oh, Lily Yumper, thank you for your super chat. I appreciate that. And with that, let's jump into something completely different. Donald Trump is apparently incredibly angry about a new Priorities USA ad that's been running. In fact, he's trying to stop it from playing because he says that one section of the ad is untrue. Here is the video, and we will go over the facts after this.
The coronavirus.
This is their new hoax.
We have it totally under control. It's one person coming in from China.
One day it's like a miracle, it will disappear.
When you have 15 people, and within a couple of days it's going to be down to close to zero, we really think we've done a great job in keeping it down to a minimum.
I like this stuff. I really get it. People are surprised if I understand it.
No, I don't take responsibility at all.
Priorities USA Action is responsible for the content of this ad.
Yeah, so there's some issues there. The part that they are taking issue with...
and which is that part?
The one that they have a problem with, it's where he's quoted as saying it's their new hoax. And they say, and this has been all over the place, it's that he wasn't saying that coronavirus is the hoax. He's saying that the Democrats attacking him over it is the new hoax, and that makes it not a true attack to say that he claimed it's the hoax. And some fact checkers have agreed with him.
Yeah, that's totally inaccurate because the president, when he was out there first, was saying that the idea that this was going to grow into something that they missed the boat on it was a hoax, when in fact that was not, as we know, I don't need to repeat that, was not a hoax. So it's amazing if we were to take things out of political ads that weren't true, what the Trump ads would look like. I mean, that would be anything we've seen before.
Yeah, and by the way, I want claims to be true. I just think it's such a bizarre, hair-splitting sort of thing. He went in front of a crowd of thousands of his fans and said, coronavirus Democrats, hoax.
Right.
What do we expect they are going to come out of that thinking? Like when he was calling like the impeachment a hoax, he wasn't implying that the Ukraine impeachment didn't exist. He was saying, you don't have to take this seriously. It's not based on anything. And he is giving people that same idea around the news around coronavirus. And we know now, I just saw a CBS YouGov poll, the media, 14% of Republicans trust the media on the coronavirus. Why? Because of these sorts of statements. The fact that Fox News and Donald Trump has been telling them for literally months now that you can't trust the media when it comes to the spread of the pandemic.
Right.
And so it's such a weird thing to say that it's not accurate. He was deceiving them around it. He was implying that they shouldn't trust it. He got what he wanted.
It also means it's a devastating ad. And he knows it's a devastating ad. It is really it's a totally devastating ad.
Yeah. And we have one more I want to play. Let's see. This is a Joe Biden ad. Let's see what we think of this one.
You will probably go through a process and you'll be fine.
Be calm. It's really working out. A lot of good things are going to happen.
Dr. Fauci said earlier this week that the lag in testing was, in fact, a failing. Do you take responsibility for that?
Yeah, no, I don't take responsibility at all.
But you did disband the White House Pandemic Office. So what responsibility do you take to that?
Well, I just think it's a nasty question.
And on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your response to this crisis?
I'd rate it a 10. I think we've done a great job.
What do you say the Americans were scared, though? I guess nearly 200 dead, 14,000 who are sick, millions, as you witnessed, who are scared right now. What do you say to Americans who are watching you right now who are scared?
I say that you're a terrible reporter. That's what I say.
I think that is actually a more devastating ad, showing the video of him saying it. And we were talking just a minute ago about that question. What do you say to the people who are scared? That feels like that just happened. There are 6 times as many dead that we know about as in that.
Yeah, no, and you're right. I mean, that ad is spectacular too. I think when you look at, that's a lot of stuff that we've seen. We hadn't seen it compiled if we're going to nitpick about the ads, but that ad is amazing as well. And again, you're seeing it in real time. You're watching that calendar across there and how how he's made that change in such a short period of time, and nothing has happened except it's all gotten so much worse. And I think, look, these are the messages that the Democrats and the opposition to the president have got to make, and now in real time is the best time to make them. And I think it's working. I think people are seeing it for what it is.
So you think, all the guests I've been having on over the past few weeks, we've been having a back and forth about if this plays out the way it looks like it will, in no small part because of the federal government's complete heel dragging on doing anything about it. Is that a bad thing for Trump in the election? And I think the initial expectation was, yeah, it'll be a disaster. He'll be responsible for it. Of course, it's going to hurt him. The counter argument is that he will pitch himself as a wartime president. He already went through one news cycle of saying that. And he's been using media coverage of his press conferences to create a facade of him being a responsible, reliable leader who's taking this seriously when it's 100% not true. He just said literally yesterday, nobody's done the job that we've done. We passed like 75,000 cases a few minutes ago. Right. Will the message get through to people, or will his expert manipulation of things, his brand building, is that going to win out over potentially ever rising numbers of deaths?
Well, I don't think that he is going to win any votes here. Personally, I don't think that anything, if you look at the 2018 election map and the types of people, the demographics who were voting for Democrats then, some of whom voted for Republicans in the previous election, I don't see anything that the president's doing now moving that dial at all. So what I do think is going to happen is that you're going to have a president who is involved and is going to spin the wartime thing. But if you're losing the war, wartime presidents who lose don't necessarily win elections either. So I think, that there are a lot of people that are skeptical of calling this a war. Look, his poll numbers have gone up a little bit, but surprisingly little. I thought they would actually go up quite a bit more. He's in everybody's living room. He's the president, and there's a crisis. And when you look at sort of the history of the rally around the flag effect in polling in America, you find that Jimmy Carter during Iran spiked way much higher than Trump has here. John Kennedy in the Cuban Missile Crisis, all the way up high. And then both of those men came tumbling down. I imagine Trump, never having gotten that high, is going to come down even further because of this. I don't see that this plan that the White House has put together on a political side is going to be helpful for them. I don't know how much it's going to hurt them among the people that support them, but I don't think it's going to win them more voters.
Yeah, and those sorts of ads, like we just played two. I think they were both good. I think the Biden one was probably even more effective. We've seen other ads that are sort of similar, just the playing his quotes. And the thing is, how devastating those are, they are going to be so much more devastating as the days continue with the trajectory that we're on. Like, and now add in his, we're going to be good by Easter. They're going to give us an update on the numbers on Easter. And he is just baking in such a horrible, horrible appearance of his response. That I expect we're going to see a lot more ads like that.
Yeah, I hope he wins this war. I really do. I hope that that we have to run against a president, that America has to try and dethrone a president who should have been, for whom there are many reasons to get rid of, not just the coronavirus. Let that be his one victory, and I think we'll all be fine.
I agree. Michael, thank you so much for joining us. It was great to have you on. Hopefully, we can check in periodically as this lockdown continues, especially because
I'm going nowhere, Johnny.
Okay, at least for a couple months, it looks like.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So okay. Well, thank you very much.
All right. Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
And for those of you at home, I saw a couple more super chats I wanted to get to. Rich said, please research Oprah-approved scammed. Elizabeth Warren, Tom Perez, Hillary Clinton, all complete. Okay, so I'm not familiar with that, but I am going to make another note. And Rich, I appreciate both of these suggestions. I have more time than usual to look into these things, so I will definitely do so. James Partney said, John, have you played Plague Inc.? I think I might have very briefly a long time ago. That's the video game that's sort of kind of like Pandemic a little bit, I believe. It's been a long time. But I did play Pandemic recently. And Prakar Rawal says, regular watcher from India, much love and wishes, John. Thank you. I really do appreciate that. Very briefly, I saw people commenting on that they think that Tom and Z from Dice Tower would want to do something with me. Well, I hope so. I can easily Skype in. So feel free to go into their live chat and say John Arrow from the Damage Report wants to do something. They might be familiar with the Young Turks. We don't have to talk about politics. We can just talk about games. I have a big collection. You can only see a portion of it. I know what I'm talking about. Anyway, so if you could make that recommendation to them, I would appreciate that as well. And with that, thank you everyone for joining us on this stream and bearing with us during this whole thing. Something that looks like it might continue for quite some time. Those of you who are in the stream for the first time, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel and ring the bell. That way you'll get notifications when we go live. We're basically planning every day to do something like an hour-long live show at 10 p.m. or 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, and so you can expect that. There's going to be other videos that we're going to be recording and then uploading to the YouTube channel, so definitely check the channel periodically. Interviews with candidates and things like that, those are not always going to be live, so we will be uploading those. But you can also follow twitter.com/thedamagereport. They'll be posting excerpts of all of these interviews as well. So with that, thank you everyone who's joined us, and we'll see you tomorrow where Brett Ehrlich will be joining us. We're going to be doing another top 10 list and garbage people. So if you have suggestions for either of those, you can tweet those at me and at Brett. And with that, stay safe. We'll see you tomorrow morning.